Tomorrow marks the 42nd anniversary of what's known as Black Wednesday. It highlights how the apartheid government silenced critical voices and banned political organizations and newspapers. Paul Letuli was a journalist back then, and she joins us now to talk about her experiences and how the South African media landscape has indeed changed, or maybe it hasn't. Paul, thank you so much for coming in to speak to us today. 19th of October 1977 is the date that people remember around about this time, specifically in connection with Black Wednesday. Various prominent journalists were arrested on that day. Publications were banned. What do you remember of that day?
I remember a lot of chaos at the office. And when we got word that we had been banned.
Where were you at that time? What publication were you at?
I was working for the World newspapers. And but working for the women's section. We used to have Women's World, and that's what I worked for, writing features there. And on that particular day, we had police at the office, and they were looking for some of the journalists. I remember the name that they mentioned was Duma Ndlovu. And when Duma Ndlovu heard that he was being hunted down by the police, he managed to just disappear. In fact, he went into exile on that day. He left South Africa, but they didn't leave the office before they took our editor, Percy Goboza. And at the same time, some of the journalists that we work with, like Willie Bukala, Gabu Tukwana, and others, Muhlomi and others, were already in jail.
Do you think that we've done enough to remember what exactly the media at that time had to go through to ensure that people's stories of what the apartheid regime was doing at that time was not only being told in some way, shape or form in the country, but also outside of the boundaries of the country?
I think we try, but I also think that because we seem to think that everything is fine, because we have our democracy, people go on like it's normal. In those days, nothing was normal. So we made sure that we were the voice of the people. We made sure that people got to understand what was going on in the country. And so the most important thing that needs to happen in our country right now is to bring back that consciousness for journalists to understand that they are the eyes and ears of the people. You know, it's sexy to write stories about corruption only, but at the same time we have our areas like the locations. Even look at what's happened to downtown Johannesburg, and with a media that is vigilant, those things would be in your face all the time, so we are able to do something about it and mobilize our communities to be conscious about loving their environment, for instance.
Indeed. Now, since the dawn of democracy, transformation has been key, an important part of that journey into democracy. And all industries have had to take a very, very honest and close look at themselves to see how they should best go about transforming, both in terms of staff, and how they go about their day-to-day, and of course also ownership. Do you think the media has taken enough time to honestly look at itself in terms of transformation, both in its newsrooms, how it tells stories, what stories it tells, and indeed ownership as well?
I think a lot has happened in our media. A lot positive has happened. The stories are being told. And some of the stuff that we read about that's happening in our government, for instance, we would not have been able to tell then.
You think immediately of the work of an organization like Amabungane?
Yes, Amabungane do a fantastic job in getting into the gist of what is going on in our country. But I think that we could do more. I think we're concentrating too much on the political side, and yet there are just civil issues that we should be also dealing with. And I think we are not doing enough about transformation of women in the country, because look at us. We're dealing with the
LGBTQI community.
Right now. Okay, and we shouldn't be. Everybody else should be conscientized about what is going on around us. You know, we've kind of made people to be working against each other rather than work together for the good of our country.
You say that at the time of Black Wednesday in 1977, you were working in a section of a publication that looked at women's issues. You went on to be the editor of True Love and the publisher of Tribute magazine. Over the last couple of years, we've seen some rather horrific stories of female journalists or female media practitioners being the victims of horrible cyberbullying and some very dangerous rhetoric that's come out as a result of that. How do you feel about that?
I think it's not acceptable, but especially if it comes from colleagues. You know, I think by now, male and female journalists should be understanding that they are about the same objective. And what is going on is a microcosm of what is happening in our society. And so I believe that we have a bigger issue. Then what helped us get together was Black consciousness. And that's why when we got banned, it was about anything that represented or believed in Black consciousness. And right now, we do need something that will bring us together. And so we start understanding the fact that, you know, we have civil duties as not only as journalists, but also as, inhabitants of this country. Everybody needs to put in their, bring in their shoulder to the wheel. And so the rot is everywhere. And I believe that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We need to bring back, the NGOs that were about values. For instance, people need to start learning the values of respecting one another and understanding that if you ban a library, it's your child or yourself who...
For every action, there's a consequence.
Yes, and also the consequence of doing wrong things. You know.
Just very quickly, because we have run out of time, the narrative that media have a role in fueling, in the kinds of stories that we tell, is something that weighs on us on the day-to-day. You spoke about the importance of Black consciousness for your generation of journalists. You were also a member of the Union of Black Journalists. Do you think there's enough of an awareness of the narrative that we feed around the bodies and minds of Black women and Black children, Black men in South Africa on the day-to-day of these news diaries that we put together?
I don't think so. We are about exposing rot without coming up with solutions. You know, we are exposing all the time. Yes, it's okay to expose. It's okay to talk about the wrong things that are going on. But when do we write about things that are positive? Because remember that we are leaders of society. Whatever you write, somebody reads and believes and looks up to. But how do we leave the person who's reading it with the mind that it's okay to steal or there are consequences for stealing? You know, and I think the kind of journalism that we have is about exposing, but we do need to take the responsibility and say we are also about educating and informing the communities about, you know,
and not just leaving an unfinished perception that perhaps isn't based on.
I mean, you watch the dramas; everything is unfinished story.
Unfortunately, it is. Pult Lutuli, thank you so much. This is a conversation that we could go on with. Thank you so much. Former journalist, former editor of True Love and publisher of Tribute magazine, and one-time member of the Union of Black Journalists, as tomorrow we mark the 42nd anniversary of what's known as Black Wednesday.